Hi, everybody. This is Maggie from NatSec Girl Squad. I'm really excited for a very special unicorn session today that I kind of get to be on the sidelines and watch. Today, I am joined by General Paul Funk from TRADOC, who sent me this really sweet hat that everyone has seen me very excited about on the internet, and a NatSec Girl Squad member that many of us may recognize from the interwebs. I'm joined also today by Major Jessica Dawson, who's a research scientist and assistant professor. Did I do it right? Yes. At the Army Cyber Institute, we are going to talk today not just about misinformation, disinformation, malinformation, but really information warfare. And why does this matter to the United States and in particular to the Army? So big Army and TRADOC. So thank you both for hanging out with us today.
It's great to be with you today, Maggie, and thanks for wearing my hat.
It's a great hat. It's very soft, I have to say. It's the softest hat anyone has ever sent me in the mail, so thank you.
There you go.
So, we've planned this conversation pretty thoroughly, and I want to leave a little bit of room for whatever comes up, as I'm sure something will. And of course, most of the NatSec Girl Squad audience is familiar with what information warfare is, but just for the sake of setting the stage, how would you all define that for the context of this conversation?
Jess, go ahead.
All right. When we think about what information warfare really is, it's the ability to engage in and accomplish your objectives really without firing a shot, right? You're able to tackle your goals, whatever those strategic goals are, by attacking the cognitive space, the social glue, right? Like one of the things that's like fascinating, if anybody's read Kai Strittmatter's book, We Have Been Harmonized, Life in the Chinese Surveillance State, right? He talks about how they have completely erased Tiananmen Square from the cultural memory inside of China. That's information war.
Yeah.
Right? And that's really critical because like now the people have very little memory, at least as far as we know, of a time when their government attacked them, right? That's shaping the attention and the social glue. And that's attacking it in a lot of ways, right? And it's preventing, this thing that we believe in the West of that the government is accountable to the people. So when we think about information war, it's very much attacking that social glue, that stuff that binds us together. And you can accomplish a lot when you do that.
And something that you've mentioned in a lot of your work, and I think the word choice is both super important and super interesting, is what it means for a narrative to be weaponized, right? And you sort of alluded to a little bit of this just in the example you gave, but can you talk a little bit more about that and what it means?
Yeah, when we think about like weaponization of narratives, right? Like this is really changing the understanding of what an event means, right? Like there's this whole thing in sociology of like understanding events and who gets to define a situation. Well, when we start changing the narratives around things, we start to change the meaning of things. And we see this, we look at it, there's a really good example, a homegrown example of that with 9/11, right? After 9/11, President Bush was very adamant that like this was not, the war on terror was not a war on Islam, right? And he was very clearly trying to draw a line between the folks that attacked us on 9/11 and everyday Muslims, right? We see this narrative shift when President Obama is elected, right? And somehow this idea that he's a Muslim means that he can't, like A, like he's a Christian, but also B, like even if he was a Muslim, that doesn't mean he can't be a good American, right? Or a good person. So we've really seen this weaponization of this narrative. Our adversaries are being very clever about weaponizing this narrative of Muslims as A, not American, and B, like not good people. And they're able to turn the meaning of that around. And so because so many Americans don't know or have Muslim neighbors, this is the only thing that they engage with, right? So it's a very effective tool to turn the populace against another element of the populace.
So I want to make sure we come back to that. But before we do, I'm curious from both of your perspectives, right? And Major Dawson is as a professor, as a research scientist, and General Funk is leading, TRADOC, Training and Doctrine Command. I want to ask both, how do we know that, of course this matters, but how do we know that the national security community needs to be paying particular attention? And how do we know that our community writ large and maybe certain segments of the community are being targeted? From both of your perspectives, what are you seeing in your own, day-to-day lives and your leadership, and that it says to you like, hey, this is worth doing a unicorn session on during a pandemic?
So Jess, why don't you go on? Why don't you take the first part, and then I'll go right after you.
Well, I mean, I think, thanks, sir. I appreciate that. But I think the biggest thing is why wouldn't we be targeted, right? Like when we really think about what does it mean to attack the United States, right? Attacking our national security community, attacking our military in this cognitive space, in this social space is the primary way to do it. You don't want to go, nobody wants to go force on force with us. So why wouldn't we be attacked in this space?
Right.
Sir?
Yeah, and what are our most respected institutions? Why not take those on? Why not start to beat the fabric down? And remembering that we're an all-volunteer force, and this is a contested environment. It's an incredibly, and it's, I guess ours is built on trust of the American people. They trust their army to get things done and to do them right and do the right things the right way. And so when that violates, when we have something that happens and it goes against that trust factor, it can be pounded into society very quickly. So I think that's one of those things that we really got to understand is the narrative matters. And when you're off the narrative, it can be a target of opportunity that really can be impactful.
And I think, something we've talked about prior to recording is that, and you've just alluded to, General, is that why not go after the institutions that make up this country that we rely on, right? And as you've said, this is an all-volunteer force. So what's the best way to go after an institution? Well, just like the economy, institutions are really just people. So how do you exploit those social cleavages, right, to undermine the trust? And more than that, build distrust, right? And something I've noticed is kind of putting it under this cloak and dagger of, oh, this is something they don't want you to know. It's never really clear who the they is. Like if anyone finds out who the they is, please let me know. I'm dying to know. But this is not a genuine, real information sharing, grassroots, soldier, sailor, airman, Marine on the ground, like telling you what's really happening. These are bad actors, right? Like, how do we know that? How do we know that?
Let's go to the expert, Jess.
So one of the things that one of my collaborators, Professor Dana Weinberg at Queens College in CUNY, and I have discovered is we've been looking at Russian information operations, right? And one of the things that they've been doing very, very effectively is pretending to be veterans online, right? So they've wrapped themselves in this fake veteran, fake patriot thing, right? But what's interesting is that they're not very good. They'll say things in their profiles of like combat vet, right? But like when you actually start talking to them, they don't know where they served. They don't remember if they were in Iraq or Afghanistan. Like it's very, very surface level, right? So when you're actually talking to like real veterans, yeah, like so, but the way that they're able to exploit that is because the vast majority of Americans don't know anybody that's served, right? And so what they're doing is they're able to make it look like veterans are saying these things, and because most folks don't have the ability, like, yeah, that doesn't sound right, or they don't have because they just don't know, right? They're able to exploit this information space, and what they're doing, like as you mentioned with the institutions. They are using veterans to target government institutions. They are using veterans, right? A lot of their tweets are pitching veterans against the press, right? Mm-hmm. So now, and again, that's a legitimate historical like artifact coming out of the legacy of Vietnam, right? And yet they are amplifying this and they are using fake veterans to target the press. They're using fake veterans to go after the government and say the government's betraying you, right? There's a legitimate historical precedent there. Like when we look at the narrative, like the actual things that happened with Vietnam, there's real history there, but now it's being weaponized again by our adversaries, right? So we never healed the schisms from Vietnam in a couple of these ways, and now they're being weaponized against us. So it's complicated, and yet it's not, right? Because if more people knew vets, we'd know that this was BS.
Right.
So Jess makes some great points there, and about. I can talk about the international side of that from being the commander of Joint Task Force Operation Inherent Resolve. And I can talk about it from my dad's a Vietnam vet, happens to be a Vietnam vet. And so there are a number of different ways to approach that. What I would tell you is 79% of the kids that serve in the Army today have a relative that has been in one of the services, but only 0.04% of the current population serves in uniform. And so as those things become smaller and compressed, less people know. To get to Jess's first point of, there's not a lot of people that serve in uniform, and there's not a lot of people that have served as veterans. And so when you start working your way through that, it's pretty easy to attack that population and then isolate it because, those are just old vets. We don't need to listen to them. Or we do listen to them, but it's really not veterans that they're talking to. So it's really easy to stratify that. Break. If you take the Russian influence piece, I saw this as a commander in overseas, as I said, in Iraq and Syria. And what I will tell you is our adversaries understand that the trust piece of this thing is our secret sauce. This uniform used to mean two things around the globe, and still does in many cases: hope and fear. So it's hope for the downtrodden, those that want to change, get rid of a despot, those that want to be part of something different. And it's fear to our adversaries because they understand that when we come in, there's a level of expertise and a level of precision that we can use that separates them from the populations. So that's what this uniform used to be. So how do you attack that? Well, you start taking pictures of, in the information space, of some misaction, and I watched this happen. And Jess is right; they're very clumsy examples. But the former Prime Minister of Iraq would tell me, "You Americans are great. You say one good thing once, and you think everybody in the world believes you."
Right.
The Russians, who own all the TV stations and all the freaking radio stations, say 1,000 pieces of disinformation against what you said a day. Who do you think the people are listening to?
Right.
And so, there's a repetitiveness that our adversary uses where their volume becomes part of their, mass has a perspective all of its own, right? And that's true. So
it's one of those few times where quality and quantity are not correlated in the way that you're hoping they'd be, right? And I think it really, begs this question, for a lot of people who maybe hear this conversation and are like, all right, look, it's just a subset of people on Twitter. It's just a subset of people on Facebook. This is really a social media problem. There's not and it's annoying. It's not a threat. There is no real national security implication here. It has no impact on our lethality and on our ability to be effective. The three of us know that's not true. A lot of people know that's not true, right? So how do you explain to somebody, really from that tactical perspective, right? Of like, no, when, people hear 1,000 pieces of disinformation a day, you think they're going to remember the one thing you said one time 2.5 years ago on VOA? Like, no, it doesn't work that way. Correct. So I'm curious, like, how do, and especially for you, sir, I mean, social media has become more popular among senior leaders recently, let's say, but and you are quite good at it. And I imagine that it's not uncommon for you to get a little bit of flack or fake veteran activity, let's say that, right? So I guess maybe my question is two parts, which is, when you go to explain to people, particularly in your role now, given your previous experience, why does this matter on the ground? Yeah. And how do you respond to it when you see it?
Yeah, let me answer the first question by talking about two things I already mentioned: trust and the all-volunteer force. And frankly, the most strategic piece in our nation is our security. And our security is provided by an all-volunteer force. If, in fact, the trust of the American people to send us their sons and daughters to serve is impacted, guess what? That's how you change the narrative, right? So our strategic strength is our people that are willing to go time and time and time again and continue to serve in this force. Like I said, 0.04% of the nation wants to defends it on foreign shores. And really in the homeland too, but let's say it's the away game. if you think about it in that regard, and you start impacting the trust in the all volunteer force from both the parents sending their kids to it and from the kids internal to it with their leaders not responding, you now have attacked the very fabric of the nation.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so then you've got then you've got a problem. So countering that narrative and maintaining the trust is why I'm on social media. It's to impact those kinds of things, man. And we have to do this, and we have to respond to these things, and we have to put them in perspective. Like you said, there's a perspective to this. Some is social media, some's nonsense, but there is an element of disregard for the security of the nation that we have to counter. And I think Jess would agree. And I'll let the experts speak. As I said, you know, I'm just a novice to this.
Yeah, sure.
Well, I mean, it's funny when we think about, like, you know, the internet as a serious tool, right? And I know when I was, you know, much younger in uniform, there was debate about should things that happen on social media impact real world, right? And have real world consequences. Well, Jamal Khashoggi can tell you that things that happen on social media have real world consequences, right? He was absolutely targeted by the Saudis for an online campaign of harassment and trolling. They got workers at Twitter to give up his information so that, and I don't know if there was a specific link between like what happened on Twitter and like what happened to him later, but there was absolutely a real world consequence to the harassment that he was subjected to by the Saudis. Why would we think that can't happen to us? Right. We saw something, you know, very, very like it started when the COVID outbreak first happened. Right. China said that it was one of our staff sergeants that did this. And so now, like, this person was getting trolled and getting harassed. And it's like people will show up at your house. Right. It's not just people like turn it off. There's not consequences. Right. People will show up at your house. You know, your social media can be hacked and like people can put like child porn on your computer and make it look like you're doing these things, right? So all of us are vulnerable to this. And that's really the key piece when we think about like why does this matter on the ground to commanders tactically? Well, let's look at COVID again, right? Let's look at how much training time we've lost because we've got this misinformation environment about, you know, how do we defeat it? Well, if everyone agreed that wearing a mask actually worked and everyone wore a mask, we would lose a lot less training time, right? So that misinformation environment has had a real world impact on our ability to train. That's a tactical problem all day long.
Sure. And I think, you know, as we talk through this issue and what do we do about it, there's really kind of two separate fronts in my mind, right? There's the immediate as it's happening right now. And then how do we better defend against it later? How do we build up the resiliency, right? And really, again, like from both of your perspectives, you know, as a teacher and a research scientist, and as the person whose job it is to literally you're in charge of training and doctrine, my understanding of those words as defined on my hat is that victory starts here. Is that right? So that right, you even got the slogan. And so I wonder, like, as you think through, there's of course kind of again like the tactical level, like one-on-one conversations, but then how do you implement coordinated campaigns to shut this stuff down? Almost just dropped a four-letter word there, so everyone knows how I really feel about information warfare. How do you shut it down, and how do you train soldiers to know what to look for, right? Because they're two sides of the same problem.
So Maggie, a great question. So first you got to educate, and how I got connected with Jess. I was looking for those persons out there that could help me understand this better because I was incredibly frustrated in theater by this. And I think we've got to educate first. We got to build doctrine. Then we've got to train the force, and then we got to use the tools that we bring to bear. There are some permission issues that we got to work our way through. There's always, you know, how are you, you know, our job is to inform the American people. It's not to, you know, not to do anything. Our job's to inform them.
Right.
And
we don't do disinformation to our own people.
So so if you want to try something challenging, So my parents are 80 and 78. My mother-in-law is 84. Try talking to them about Jess Dawson's, all her laying out her course on why this matters, and then watching them understand it once they see the pictures. And then they begin to, they understand, because they had, they actually believed everything they were seeing on the internet.
Okay? Terrifying.
Yes, it was. And then you take a pandemic, slam that into a pandemic now, where all you have time, all you do all day long is look at these things.
Yeah.
And it begins to impact. So we got to deconstruct that. And we got to use people like Jess to inform us on what's happening to us. And then we got to combat it. And that's where we come in, is with some training. Was first, this is what you should be looking for. So it's awareness. Mm-hmm. Then it becomes knowledge, and then it becomes practice. And that's what we got to do. And so that's where we are in this. Jess has done a great job in helping leading me to this. We're working very hard with a collaborative team on the information space to talk about information advantage, mm-hmm. and how you begin to operate in this space, whether it be contested, because it always is. It's going to be contested. It's competition. So understanding that and being able to compete there with the tools that Jess provides, or whoever is working on this, matters a lot. So we're just really scratching the surface now, but we're coming to this much faster than I suspected we would. And so I think, Maggie, if we're going to talk 6 months from now on this, I think you'll see a whole different stance and balance for the American Army in terms of how it's going to deal with it. We'll see today. And let me throw it over once again to the expert.
So, I mean, I think General Funk brings up some really great points, right? We have to inform and we have to educate, right? The problem that we're running into is that the way that we all have grown up consuming the news, right? Like when we were younger, there was 3 channels, right? You got your news from ABC, CBS, or NBC, right? 40% of our population under the age of 30 gets their news from YouTube. That's not curated for accuracy. That's not curated for truth. That is curated for popular. Those are 2 very different things. So we have to really start thinking about, how do we deal with the information environment as it is? People want to find the good information, and how do we make sure that it's good, right? So first of all, we have to fund things like Stars and Stripes, right? We have to fund like legitimate media sources, and we have to make it available, right? Like there's a reason that stuff is like all over the DFACs and all over the FOBs when we're forward deployed, right? We cannot just look at the internet and go, oh, information is free. No. The lies are free. The truth is paywall.
Right.
So we have to cultivate knowledge. And we do that by like having a media, like that is one of our 5 fundamental constitutional freedoms in the First Amendment. The media, the press is absolutely critical to that. The other thing is we need an army of librarians, right? Like one of my greatest like fights as an S6 is, oh, you're going to be the knowledge management officer. It's like, I'm not a knowledge management officer, I'm a signal officer, right? So we need an army of librarians to help us sort through all of this information and generate knowledge from it, and then be able to push that information out and down to the force. And we've got to teach people that these are the trusted folks to help us sort through this. That's really the big piece, right? In terms of dealing with the information environment as it is. And we've got to teach folks to be more skeptical, right? Because just as General Funk's parents are dealing with this, our kids are doing the same thing. They're not savvy media consumers. They're just drinking from the fire hose. And I think that that's a huge, huge vulnerability. But it's also an opportunity, right? Because we taught people how to put down the junk food, right? We've taught people healthfully, right? We have to teach people that like social media can be really great. Like I love Twitter, right? I learn so much on Twitter every day, but I also sit back and go, I got to look at the source on this one, right? Like you got to pay attention and not necessarily. And that wasn't an endorsement of Twitter. That was just like, I really like a lot of the information that I get out there because I can see from different groups.
Right.
But we've really got to get people to understand, like, you got to be a savvy media consumer. And that starts with knowledge. And that's where, like, there's a reason why we have libraries in, like, every community has a library, right? Because we need that shared collective knowledge, that shared place, that shared space of this is what it means to be a member of this community. We need that in the digital space.
So I got these fundamentals, one of which is trust but verify. And I think if I were going to look if I would look into the information space, especially as I was looking at whatever source, Twitter, Instagram, whatever it is, I would trust but verify. And really, as you go back down to this, it really does boil down to trust. It's trusted sources for news. It's trusted in your leaders. It's trust in the nation. The nation trusting in its army. It's all of that. So that's why we've got to be, while skeptical, we also have to have some belief that our leaders are leading us in the right directions. So it's all of that. That's why I'm always a trust but verify guy.
It's one of my favorite isms, let's put it that way. And I love that you said, Major Dawson, an army of librarians. So I've talked about this on Twitter before. One of my older siblings is in fact a librarian. She writes the curriculum for the American Library Association to teach multiculturalism through children's literature, and she is a school librarian in Trenton, New Jersey. And so, of course, I called her to prepare for this because she is infinitely smarter than I am. And something we were talking a lot about, which ties in very much with NatSec Girl Squad, is that who is absorbing the information, who's sending the information, who's creating the information, and who's verifying it all matters, right? This idea of diversity of opinion, diversity of viewpoint, diversity of experience matters in leadership and in information literacy, because these are, again, exactly the social divisions and chasms that frankly, our adversaries and enemies are looking to exploit, right? There are reasons why different demographics of people are targeted differently, right? And why some groups are more heavily targeted for disinformation. So you mentioned that 40% of people under 30 get their news off of YouTube, which scares the bejesus out of me. And I think about how in Mexico, the literacy rate is so low. There's so much news and information shared over Snapchat. I am under 30 and cannot figure out how to use Snapchat. Please do not ask me about TikTok or Discord. Like, I can't do it. I barely have a handle on Instagram. But as you guys are building kind of this curriculum and your plan, like, how do we account for the fact that no single person understands how we each move, right? Like, how do we team for this, I guess?
Well, I think the Army is a prime example of this, and it goes to our diversity and inclusion, and it goes to all of that business. We have a differing opinion. Disagreement does not mean disloyalty, and I think in our discourse needs to become much more constructive than destructive. Yeah. So when you think your way through all of what I just said, and it may sound like bumper stickers, but I truly believe we have to start listening to one another, and so that we can build on our diversity, so we can become more inclusive, and so we can see a better future for ourselves. So all of those things, trust but verified. Look at like you said,
put it on your notepad with you.
Yeah. So I mean, look, one of the neat things about the American people is we're all as Americans first. You go to Iraq, culturally, okay. So but you go to Iraq or you go to some of those countries, it goes all the way back to family. Then it goes to tribe. Then it goes to maybe region. Then it may go to sect. And finally, when all else is exhausted, oh yeah, we're Iraqis too, or whatever. But what the neat about the American people is the fact that we are so diverse, but we can become Americans first. And so I don't think we should ever lose that. And that's why the all-volunteer force is so important. I ask two questions every time I give out one of those coins. I did this, as a matter of fact. Why do you join the Army? And why did you continue to serve? And the answers you get are incredible. So you could ask Jess those questions, Megan.
Well,
see what she says.
Now I'm going to say that, when we get to our final questions in just a minute, I'm going to ask both of you those questions. So, have your bumper sticker answer ready.
Exactly. Elevator speech time. I'm with you.
Ready? Go. But I wonder for you, Major Dawson, especially, from your vantage point at the Army Cyber Institute and doing so much work in so many, like in academia and think tanks and civil society for the Army, having been forward deployed, right? Like, you have a really interesting perspective on this. And it's not just the demographic information. It's all of those things I just listed, right? Like how academia talks about this, how sociology talks about this. It's very different. Like, please tell me the last time that sociology said something like information literacy leads to greater lethality. Because like that's how my brain functions, and that's why I don't have a degree in sociology, right? Like, so how do you, I guess, kind of straddle that divide and speak to all the people?
Well, I think it was the Apostle Paul that said you can't be all things to all people, so I don't even try. But I mean, I think one of the things that General Funk was getting at, and this is our nation's strength, is we have a winning story. Out of many, one. E pluribus unum, right? Like that is the American story. And one of the professors that I teach with here, he talks about the American mosaic. Right. And so it's not that we become all one, right, but that we become that we are all these individual pieces that become part of this larger whole. And I find that a very compelling way of thinking about America as a nation, because we shouldn't ask people to give up their culture and their heritage to become, this. What we need to do is expand the umbrella of who do we see as real Americans. Yeah. That right now is part of the contested space. And I think that is the way our way out of this. We need to expand who we see as us, right? That's what our adversaries are exploiting right now. The fact that we don't do a good job of telling stories of Muslim Americans. Like why are we not telling stories about Muslim American service members, right? Like there's a lot out there that we need to be able to highlight the broad tent umbrella that is we, right? And we do that. When we do that, there's no force on earth that can stand against us, because we bring all of these unlike things together and we bump them up against each other and we get really creative problem solving, right? Like that's really why diversity is important, because we all come at these things from different angles. And when you bring all these people together, you're going to see problems differently and you're going to come up with unique creative solutions. That's why America can innovate so greatly, is because we have all of these people always wanting to come here and become American and help, and we can solve those problems, right? So, diversity inclusion isn't a buzzword for me. It's this is the way we solve these wicked problems, and that's how we continue to be a light to the nations. And we haven't always lived up to our ideals, but we can acknowledge where we've struggled in the past, and we can continue to build a better future. As General Funk said, right? We can still represent hope to the world, and that I think is one of our most important things.
And this is why a 4-star general listens to a major.
He said, I didn't even have to add the part about it not being a buzzword, right? That's my favorite when I don't have to do it, right? Because I get so tired of it. It's just, I'm like, you say it so many times, but it's true, right? And so since it is time for our last question, and I'm going to hold true to my promise of asking you, why did you join the Army and why did you continue to serve? I'm also going to put the caveat that General Funk, I'm going to take you up on that offer of having this conversation again in 6 months or however many months it is, because I want to know where you guys are. And, as I watch my youngest brother on his first deployment as a Marine, and his love of terminal lance is just like unending. He can't use social media for the life of him. I would love to see, Doctrine Man or really anybody else overtake terminal lance as like the social media account for the kids. So I will file that away for our next conversation. But with that, I will ask both of you, what made you join, enlist, or commission, and why'd you stay?
Majors first.
So I enlisted right out of high school. I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up, and I'm a product of the 90s, be all you can be Army, join the Army to get some money for college. So I did. I enlisted for 12 years, and then I commissioned right as we were going into Iraq, or like shortly, like I commissioned during the surge years. So it was the no officer left behind years. So that's how everybody got stuck. But I stay because of the values. I stay because of what we represent. Like, this is a promise. And it's a promise that takes work. And like, I talk to a lot of my students and they're like, I wasn't included in the promise of this nation when it was founded. And I was like, neither was I, but I am now. And our ideals matter and it's worth fighting for.
Amen.
So I joined the Army because I saw my dad fly a Cobra helicopter getting ready to go to Vietnam when I was 7 years old. And I thought that was the coolest thing on earth. And then I in a state university, and I knew from 7 years on that I was going to be an Army officer. I don't know anything else but the Army. I've been in the Army 58 years, Maggie.
My God.
Yeah, I was born into it. I was born at Fort Hood, Texas. And so I love this Army because of what it represents, because what it does for a young woman who can come in and say, I joined for the college money, but I stayed because it matters and it means a difference and it makes a difference every day. I get the opportunity to wake up and see a group of young people every day just trying to be that much better, that much better than their adversaries, that much better than they were the day before, and that much better in terms of being just great people. And I get to wear the cloth of this great nation every day. I don't know what I'm going to do when I got to match my pants, socks, and shoes. I'll have no idea. I'll need Garanimals.
I was going to say there's a class for that.
Yeah, that's right.
we can connect you. We've seen it happen. Can I interest you in some New Balance sneakers?
That's what I'm in. That's what us old guys wear. So I will tell you right now, this has been the highlight of my life, has been meeting people like Major Jess Dawson and watching her change the narrative, watching her make us feel what it means to be a soldier and to represent what I'll say unabashedly is the greatest country on earth. And I'll take that on anywhere, anytime, any place. So that's why I serve. And other than that, it's pretty cool, and they give you your clothes to wear.
They give you your. I mean, I was going to say, if anybody on social media wants to argue with you about, this being the greatest country on earth, please let me know. Happy to back you up there.
Yeah, I knew you would.
Right. I don't know much about TikTok, Discord, Snapchat. I'm sort of getting there on Instagram, but Twitter I've got down. I'll close by saying this. It's something I've talked about more recently, that as I look at my own family, right, and it's very clear to me that there is nowhere else in the world where I could get to do what I do every day, right? That what it has been afforded to me in one generation, or even less in some cases, right? Like, there is no other place in the world that you get to do this except here. And thank God I was born here, right? Or found my way, whatever it was. So I'm so appreciative of both of you for coming to hang out and being a part of this year's annual conference. We're sad we're not in person. I will take it virtually. I will also take you up on the offer, General Funk, of doing this conversation again, at least once, probably still virtually in a couple months, but then also again in person. So thank you. And thank you, Major Dawson. This has been awesome. And what a great way to close out the end of our first day. So thank you.
Have a great day. I'm proud of you. Thanks, Maggie.
Thanks for having us.